Hey everybody, I just wanted to put together a real quick video for you on um, what a lot of people are reaching out and asking about is what to do for those really impulsive kids, and just some ideas about how to make that a little bit easier. I've had a lot of people reaching out both through email and uh, through some of the question forms we have about what to do for those kids. And there's no question they can be super, super challenging. And a lot of times we can kind of get caught up in the conversation about whether they should have medication or if there's anything that we can do about it. And so I just wanted to touch on it for just a minute. I also sent a few emails about it, and I've put this in a couple different places. So if you haven't seen that, you can check that out too. Okay, so what we know, what isn't true, we're going to start there. Um, a lot of times, again, what I hear is there's nothing you can do if they aren't on medication. That's not true. And ultimately, it's not our decision to decide. So I always talk to teachers about that. We teach the kids that walk through the door, and that is the reality. And sometimes that can be super hard. But if we can kind of move past that idea that there's nothing we can do, then we can start to see some improvements. And along the same lines, people will say it's impossible to improve their behaviors. And I swear it's not. There, unbelievably, there are things that we can actually do to teach kids who are impulsive to be less impulsive. And to start to manage their own impulsivity. And so then we definitely will see improvements in behavior. Then I also hear if they tried harder, they could control it. And what's sometimes confusing about that, and I know why people feel that way, is that sometimes these kids are like, razor focused and they're right on. And so it feels like if they can do it sometimes, then they should be able to do it all the time. But what we know is that we're human beings, and that's not the case. Sometimes it's harder for a myriad of reasons, for them to kind of control that impulsivity. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I also hear that they're intentionally trying to make things hard. We know this isn't true. If it could be easier for them, if they could be calm, they would be. I think that a lot of times if you stop and you look at these really, really impulsive kids, then you can see like, wow, like they're struggling, right? It's not that easy to be those kids either. And then again, if they can control themselves some of the time, then they should be able to do it all the time. You'll hear this from me consistently. That is not how behavior works, because there's a lot of variables that come into play that make it easier or harder to be able to control that. And so that's not the case. Just a few quick facts. Kids have big feelings that they often don't know what to do with. And kids who are impulsive, those big feelings often come out in a lot of big behaviors, and big feelings often can be messy in the way that they look in behaviors, and they just don't know what to do with that yet. Kids don't mean to be impulsive. It's not like they set out to be impulsive. They are that kid, and they often don't even know that they're being impulsive, right? Because that's just the way that they kind of move through the world. And so, this isn't like, the intent is not to, I always say, the intent is not to drive us crazy, even though sometimes it does do that. And the interesting thing is, though we can help them control their own impulsivity, they can't control the actual feeling of impulsivity. So even though we can get them to a place where they are not acting as impulsive, that same feeling is going to come over them, but they learn to be able to control it and to stop it. So that's sort of a good way to think about it, and a good way for us to explain to them how that might feel. Because in their mind, if they're like, well, I have all these feelings of, and I whatever, it feels a certain way, for us to be able to say, yeah, absolutely, you're going to feel that way, but I'm going to teach you how to do things a little bit differently. And that's the last thing, because they can learn to regulate their impulsivity. We know that, we see it, we know we can do this. Okay, so just a couple quick tips to manage impulsive behavior. Again, some of this is just going to be reactive, just things we're going to do to help manage them. Some of it is going to be things that we can teach and do differently. So one of the most important things is that we stay calm and in control. So a lot of times when we're dealing with really impulsive kids, it can get us wound up. And the higher we get, the higher they get. So we want to stay as calm and in control as possible. We want to choose specific tasks and times of the day to focus on. So if you have a kid who has a lot of impulsivity and we're expecting them to be calm and cool all day long, that's going to fail. It's not going to work because they can't maintain it that long. So we want to really think about what time of the day is it really important for them to be less impulsive. So is that during a direct instruction time? Is that during math? Is that during reading? What time of the day do we want them to really try and be a little bit more cool and collected? That's the time we're going to focus on. If we try all day, we're going to fail and they're going to feel like failures too. We want to identify the baseline. So, what does it actually look like during a day with this student? I know in our own minds, it can feel like it's going all day long and there's never a time when they're not being impulsive, but we really do want to kind of take some baseline quote unquote data. Like, what times of the day do we really see it? Which times are worse? Which times are better? Because that's going to be our baseline. That's going to be where we start. We want to always look at breaking longer tasks into smaller ones for these kids. That's going to always be a good starting place. And one of the things to remember about this, what seems like a long time to you is not the same as what seems like a long time to them. So you might think it's reasonable for them to be able to pay attention for 10 minutes. But if their baseline is 1 minute, then it's not going to be realistic that they can go 10 minutes right now. So we want to break those longer tasks into smaller chunks. It helps you feel more successful. It helps them feel more successful. And even though it might slow down your teaching and break it up in a way that you're not used to, think about all the times you're already stopping to deal with that impulsive behavior. So really looking at that, what we expect of kids. I think, and this is for a whole nother training, but the reality is that our developmental our expectations don't really meet developmental expectations at this point in schools. We expect a lot more from kids than developmentally they're probably able to. So for example, if you're teaching a kindergarten class, it's not unusual for me to see kids sitting on the carpet for 20 to 30 minutes. And that developmentally really is tough for most kids. But many kids have just adapted to that timeline, but some kids just are not able to. And this goes along with the next one. Double and triple check that the expectations are developmentally appropriate. Even if that means go back to like your, early teaching classes, or just look it up on, on the internet. What is the developmental expectation for this age? And look at the high and the low, because that's where you're gonna, run into some bumps. Yes, you might have some kids who can hit the highest level of the expectation, but you're also gonna have some kids who are gonna hit that lowest level. So how do you kind of balance that out? Creating to-do lists and letting kids with impulsive behavior kind of monitor their own progress and process, really super helpful. Just really helpful for those kids to be able to have a visual of what's coming, what they've done. There's something super powerful about kids being able to scratch out something they've already done or to see what's already over for the day. Very helpful. And then teaching waiting skills as an actual skill, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide, but is really, really super important, because we assume that kids just know how to wait, but they don't. That's really a skill that needs to be learned. So even kids who are not impulsive, waiting is hard. And so the more that we can kind of incorporate that into your day, depending on what developmental group you're working with, all the way from, preschool through high school, what that looks like, the more helpful you're going to be. Another skill that I really love to work on, and you can call it whatever you want depending on the age group that you work with, is practicing calm bodies. So what does that look like in your class? What does it look like to have a calm body? Does it mean that they're in their chairs? Does it mean that their bodies stay in a space? Does it mean that their phones are away? What does it look like to you for a calm body? Teach that skill just like you would reading, writing, or math. Okay. Now, just a couple quick ideas for some games and strategies and some ideas for teaching those waiting skills. Any game, like Simon says, red light, green light, things like that, all really good for teaching waiting, because they can't be successful unless they wait and listen for the instruction or do what they're supposed to. I have done this with high school kids all the way down to preschool kids. High school kids happen to love these games. And they have to pay attention and they have to wait, because they lose the game if they don't. Spoon and egg game, this is one of my favorites across all grade levels, is that all it is sort of a race with, you have you have an egg in holding onto a spoon, and they have to run it from one person to the next without dropping the egg. Hint, use a hard boiled egg, because if you don't, it's very messy. But again, for high schoolers, they think that's really funny. And you have to wait, you have to be calm, you have to be able to be patient to be able to win the game. 20 questions is good. You can't be impulsive. You have to wait and listen to all the information that's coming in. Anything like that, we kind of consider a game, but it's really, really helpful. Some other ideas to try when you're working on the skill is using a visual as much as you can. First, you're doing this, then you're doing this. These are the things you have to get through. Any kind of visual, even big fan of timers, and they have the timers that have the big red that shows when your time's going down. Great for all ages. Kids like to see, when they're starting and when they're ending. It's easier for kids with impulsivity to be able to control themselves when they know they have a specific amount of time to do it. Teaching kids with impulsivity to ask for breaks. So that's one of those skills that they can start to learn to help regulate themselves. If they know what that feeling is when they've kind of gone almost too far, then they can ask for a break. And the more they learn to do that, the more successful they'll be. A great skill. We as adults do that for ourselves. We know when we need to stand up. We know when we go use the restroom because we need to move. We do all those things. Helping kids learn that early is really important. We want to reinforce waiting. Anytime you see, especially an impulsive kid, you want to reinforce that they're calm, they're waiting, they're taking their time. Anything that kind of fits into that skill, as opposed to always pointing out when they're not doing it right. Reinforce them when you catch them doing it well. So even if they sit down at the table and they wait until you give the instruction, that's huge. Reinforce them for that. Anytime you see them do it, if they wait to be called to line up, reinforce them for doing it. The more you can do that, the more they can start to identify, oh, this is what I should be doing, and this is what it feels like when I wait. And then keeping those waiting expectations really realistic, meaning, how long are we asking them to wait? How long, what developmental level are they? Is it something that's really exciting? Keeping in mind that it's going to ebb and flow with how easy it is. All right, that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much. And I will see you soon. Bye bye.